lot of people
Oh,
have to,
wow.
well, that's what how I
The
questioned it. So
the observer of both the knower
and
and the self.
yeah.
Oh, I didn't think of that one. That's
So you
interesting
didn't write down,
because
you didn't read what I wrote down when I gave it to you guys.
in the messenger, maybe
It's okay.
I missed
It was
that.
still an interesting
That
conversation.
that there is a third party. There's a first party, self, then there's the knower,
Hmm.
because somebody has to know thyself, and then
The observer,
there is oh, an
observer.
additional someone called the observer, who has to look, understand, or be able to see the knower and the self. So there's three people in one, the Trinity.
It could be.
What do you
It
think
could be.
about that,
It could be.
Herman?
It could be. It was all an effort to just ponder things. It could be all the same. The observer, like anything else, when you're observing something, are you judging it? And if you is it going to make a change? If I see my parents, I'm observing them and I'm seeing them from a distance. And let's say I don't agree with what they're doing, but I'm so far away from them. Would I really
Mm.
make a difference? And should I even interfere? This is where you're looking at the self and the knower as the ideal that they could be separate.
What about when we make a vow? I will not smoke again,
Hmm.
or I will not kill again, like killing bugs or eating meat again,
Hmm.
because indirectly you think it's a form of killing. Or I will not lie again, in
Making that,
including
who's making that
lies,
decision? Sorry, again, go ahead, guys.
or including lies of a omission. What if we're asked, what did you do today, and you admit something? Would that be considered lying? Like, if someone asks you, what did you do today, are you supposed to report everything you did today? No. Would that be lying if you admit something, omit something? Isn't there something called lies of omission? Well, it depends, I guess, in how detailed you the question is. Lies of omission, or am I imagining things?
It depends on your
Lies
patterns.
of omission. Oh, there's a movie called of that. Lying by omission, also known as a continuing misinterpretation, or quote mining, occurs when an important fact is left out in order to foster a misconception. Lying by omission includes the failure to correct pre-existing preconceptions. Like if you're interrogated by the police, and you omit a key ingredient in the investigation, that could be lying. Maybe you could end up in court and they would get you for lying by omission. What do you think?
Oh, lying by omission.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, but it could be interpreted that you're just holding back information. Depends on your pattern. If I ask a person a question, and it's usually not it's how they respond that might give it away. Especially if you make the question very close end. But if you're consistent and a person asks a question, where were you Saturday? My question is always respond back by saying, may I ask why you're asking the question? This goes back to Socrates. Ask a question with the question, because that person hasn't showed you that's asking the question, what's their intent? We're too
Hmm.
busy responding because it's always about me, me, me. That's the self. So if you know enough, now if your pattern is always never to ask a question, and now you start asking a question to the person that asked that question, that person already if he understands himself, he'll realize you're playing a game. So let's see how far this game will go. Meaning that I know it's checkmate in 30 moves, but you're just seeing that I've made my second move. So it's one of those things where human beings, we're not that complicated. We only make ourselves complicated because we don't understand. It's kind of like, it's probably in the States, you buy the Kia, but you don't read the instructions to put it together. That's kind of the ideal. If you really go within oneself, find out what the self is first, then you realize. It's like when you were just saying a
Hmm.
couple of minutes ago about you don't want to lie anymore or whatever. Well, who's the one you're talking to or with? The
Hmm.
knower or the self? You know what I mean? Like when they do, here's one example. They've done studies on this. They've just never put those words to it. Where a person says, how about you practice doing basketball shots or kicking a ball in a top right-hand corner of a soccer pitch in a net? And then another person says, no, I want you to go home and I want you to think about it before you do it. Why does the one that comes back after he's been thinking about it do more times than not does it better? Because the knower and the self are different. The self is just a program. It's like, having a meetup and not having a question. I'm just using this example, prior, so people can at least meditate on it or at least ponder it during the day, opposed to coming right to the meetup and here's the question. Most people can't respond right then and there. They're just not conditioned that way. It's like a professional race car driver. They're taught how to drive under certain conditions. You're not going to put an expensive car to a person that says, well, I want to drive the Ferrari or Lotus, and then all of a sudden it's a rainy day. No, you're not going to put that responsibility to a guy, especially when the car is worth more than he is. And when I say worth more, or our organs are only worth a couple of millions. The body might be, the car might be worth 5 million. Again, we forget we're property. We're livestock. We've always have been, and that's not going to change. Whether or not you make one a slave and another a master, that's all conditioning.
So when we decide or take a vow to not lie for a whole day, let's say, because maybe we're a compulsive liar.
Oh, sweet.
Then we decide for whatever reason, maybe someone tells us if you stop lying, then people will begin to trust you more and you'll gain benefits. So there's benefits from taking a vow to not to lie or to not to kill or to not to what other things, not to have a sexual misconduct.
But the thing is, Jay, hold on. Give me a second, Jay. Unless you realize the reason why somebody would lie, and you have to go inwards. Once you realize, why am I lying? Because I am trying to get somebody's trust. The only reason why a person would change that, and we'll just say the vow that you're talking about, you're making a vow, you're saying, okay, so I'm just redirecting it. What template do I have when I lie? Well, I make up stories. Whose trust am I trying to get? More times than not when a person lies, it's because they're lying to themselves. The reason why they're being...
they want to deceive the other.
That's a given. That's a given. Religion is a deception. It's a manipulation. They're not there to save you. And when did it become... I'm just going to go on a little bit here, Jeremy. You don't know who I am, but I go on because I realize I have to agitate certain things. So in this case, when did it ever become the responsibility of any dogma to represent you? State's not there for you. Hence Roman Catholic ideal and religion. They're not there for you. They can tell you stories, and it's up to you to say, listen, was that a fairy tale story? Was it done in Hollywood? Was it sent down by God? Was it sent by Lucifer? Whatever. You can make whatever stories you want. You still have to go to yourself and say, okay, does the lie start outside or does it start inside? This is the inquiry. Now, if you're going to talk about being truthful, isn't it the same story?
Yes.
Truthful. Who do you want to be? Who do you really want to have as a friend? You. That's how you lead. That's why most people, when they talk about having a relationship cannot exist externally and function and be maintained unless you do it within. You have your own kingdom. I don't know if you ever heard the last video, but we have our own kingdom within ourselves. We have king and queen here. I've kind of misquoted it. There's a crown above us. And then you have 10 other receivers in your body. We're more high tech than any cell phone will ever be. But unfortunately,
king and queen similar to the left and the right brain. Is that what?
Yep. That's how the concept
by king and queen.
Yep. And then you have a crown.
And which side of the brain is considered the king and which is the queen?
Wow, you first have to grasp the idea that let that sit in for a bit. You got to let that sit in. You're jumping. I've just introduced you a certain variations how to play with number, and now you want to know how do I run with that? It's something you have to figure. Now there's feminine and masculine on that side, logic and also creative side and all that. But I'm trying to share that's how we see the external world from the internal world. So, we just think magically, and there could be magic, where we look at royalty family. Well, we're our own royalty family. And then the king and queen have to be united. This is why when people say I'm more creative than I'm logical, I said, because you're unaware that those things are always supposed to be one. Because if your kingdom is separated, then you're not going to take wise counsel from the rest of your body. We have many receivers in our body. You know, like we're a very high tech machine. Now somebody could turn around and say, yeah, but I'm a doctor. I said, so you went to university to get 1 degree? Well done. You're like a SEAL now. How much money are you going to get paid in one lifetime? He says, well, I can make millions of dollars. Well, they can print it in a day. Actually, not even a day, in 5 minutes.
So you're saying that if I want to take a vow, I have to think whether it's coming from the internal or from the external. Maybe the external is religion, like it's imposing that we be truthful and this and that, or internal that's coming from us that we aspire to be truthful, so that we don't have to keep track of all our lies and make sure that we don't get caught.
But how do you know? How do you know the word that is within? I mean,
yes, and what is, how do I know that it's coming from within me? That it's innate, maybe that it's more than the self, but it's like the soul. The soul. What do you think of the word soul? Do we have a soul?
You can call it the knower if you want. You can call it the knower. You can call it the unknown. You can call it spirit. You can call it whatever you want.
What about the observer? Could the soul be the observer? And
sure, you can observer, witness. You can call it whatever you want. These are words we're just using.
Yeah, but you said there was an observer looking at the knower, knowing thyself. So which one is the soul? Is the soul the self, or is the soul the knower, or is the soul the observer?
Who's the one that's inquiring? There you go. Who's the one that's inquiring?
Is the observer able to know? Because the knower is doing the knowing. Can the observer also know? The observer is trying to know the knower, and the knower is trying to know the self. What if they're all one person?
It could be.
What if? Well, they're contained in our body somehow, or somewhere.
Could be. Could even might not even be within the body. Hence, you seek from within it.
Could be somewhere else, but we're experiencing it. Well, with our eyes, we think that we're in here. Maybe we're in here, like in our kind heart.
It's a heart. I don't know if it's kind. I guess you could have variations of it. It could be kind. It could be deceitful. It could be many things. I just want you to blow up with your capability here.
Innately kind, like we're kind by nature.
Are we? Are we?
But we
ponder that. Hold on, Jay. Before you go any further, you said a question for yourself. This is something you can learn. This could be 101. You just said something. Is there any basis on that? Have you looked at humanity recently? Have we always had war? Have we always had greed?
Why do we kill?
Why would you kill?
Now you're talking self-defense. It could be self-defense. So we're being kind to ourselves, to our body.
So hear me out then. Hear me out. Isn't creating a gun to defend is the same reason why you get a gun to attack? It's a perpetual cycle. It's when you observe how, when you're in the knowing and self mentality. When I say the knower, Jay, and I've kind of said this before, when you go to sleep, who runs that body? And I don't wish this upon anybody, if you go into a coma state, who runs that body? The ego, the self. What's that?
The soul?
Sure. I'm calling it a different word. I'm saying the
week or two has been watching our videos on Wake Up and Think Clearly, and maybe he has a connection with Joel in Toronto, because he's in Toronto, and he joined, and he got my attention because he was trying to join, and he also befriended me on Facebook, and I was looking through his feed on Facebook and found some things interesting, and I was interested in Gnostic Studies group.
Nice.
And he was talking to me about Gnosticism, and that it involves more than just verbal language. It involves thinking intuitively, and if you pick up something like this, what what happens in your mind when you see an object? Oh no, that's not a good answer.
Well, I probably can, I can explain it better actually.
Yeah, explain it.
Luis, what I was explaining was we live in a material realm. So when we hold up a piece of paper like this, I could say the language, piece of paper, white square piece of paper. You don't actually see the language on what we call the material. This is where old teachings of subjective, objective, this is just the material. So once you realize that, you don't see hand, you don't see hat. What you do is you're communicating with a language that's classified as an unknown called the spiritual realm. So your experiences are done more in the thought and in the emotional realm. So we don't see emotions, we express emotions. So right. What I was tapping in with Jay there was Gnostic is an inner teachings. We're going to use a downgraded thing such as language. Language like English, for example, as we're using right now, is a meaningful language of 4 languages combined. Old philosophers of old, if they came through a certain womb, they say they spoke Greek. That's a comprehension language. Sanskrit's a healing language. With all the thousands of languages we have, a lot of them do different things in the vibration frequency realm. So yep. When a person is trying to communicate certain teachings, the written work is a very linear teaching. The oral teaching engages the 12 receivers that we have in our body. The king and queen, the crowns, can only comprehend so much when you're only reading written work. So this is why when people say Gnostic teachings, unless that teaching is done orally, downloaded, and then you share it externally, you're not engaging all your other receivers. And this is where intuition, imagination resides within all our vessels. Hence why know thyself. Who's the knower and who's the self? The self is what we call the ego. It's the conditioned part of us. I'm using a language to communicate. That's conditioning. But as I'm talking with you, I have 2 liquids in my body, blood and water. Something else is functioning that, hence the knower. So I went on too much.
Beautiful explanation. Dominic, I want to tell you right off the bat that I understand deeply.
Thank you. Well done.
Everything that you just said, and not only what you just said, but the ramifications. So at all levels, because of course, the Gnostic experience is a unification experience, a coherence experience, an integral, holistic, all-encompassing experience, which goes beyond the word, which goes beyond thought as we understand it in human terms. So I want you to know that it's not very often that people understand such language. Mm-hmm. Or if they do, they think they do, but they don't. So they stay at the superficial understanding of that. But I want you to know, because it feels very good when you meet someone mm-hmm. and you feel this unification of thought and understanding, of experiencing, which goes beyond words. The very words that you're saying are labels on the material thing, which et cetera, et cetera. And so sometimes we suffer, we shouldn't, but we do suffer at the emotional and intellectual and rational level, because we feel that we're onto something. And when we open our mouth, saying, listen, this is important, this is big. And then people look at us like, what the hell are you talking about? So it can be at the very least disconcerting to go, you don't understand what I'm saying? And that's the reality. Most human beings stay at the superficial level of life, what I call the conventional, the run-of-the-mill, conventional, day-to-day, little hamster on the wheel. But they cannot step outside of the wheel while they are in the wheel, and to go into this realm that is transcendent, not conventional, which transcends the words, transcends the materiality, goes beyond the phenomenal side of reality, and goes into the non-phenomenal, which you somehow alluded to, which is the noumenal side of the yin-yang. So there, I understood everything you said without any
That's
questions.
the most important part. For me, when I usually talk to my colleagues or friends, acquaintances, even my enemies, I prefer them sometimes because at least they'll be more of an agitator. Most people never develop in those 7-year cycles, first 7, then the next 7, then the next 7, critical thinking and emotional development. So I know when I'm talking to somebody that emotionally is not developed, hence why we have so many wars here. So for me, I just try to assist other people to understand for themselves because I'm never going to understand them. That's not my role.
Yeah,
It never has been, never will be. But for me to allow them to say, okay, so let's play the game. I'm not worrying about you coming to my awareness, but for you to become aware. Why do you go to work? Why do you chase federal notes? How does the skin work? But that's a struggle, Louis, for most people. And when they say, you know, I've heard some of my buddies say to me, Dom, you're mad. I said, would you be able to explain intelligence? I said, so you're playing a circle game with yourself. And most of them, I know they get offended. I said, so you're offended now by language. This is me knowing that I'm sharing with other fellow beings, because I'm always looking for fellow students through myself, because really I'm using a language that I realize I didn't create. I just get to experience it.
Yeah.
And I just struggle.
I don't struggle. I'm very lucky. I don't struggle. I don't struggle because other people struggle, knowing that there's very little I can do about it. I do offer knowledge, understanding, compassion. So I do my part to alleviate others' suffering. So that's all I can do. Be a positive influence, a soothing, calming coherence in my environment. But I know very well that the environment is going to change itself, unbeknownst to itself. And all I can do is, in my own perspective and realm and possibilities, bring coherence and compassion as much as I can, because that's what I am. So I cannot be coherent if I struggle, because precisely what I'm trying to permeate through is the non-struggle, the peaceful abiding, the ataraxic state of mind, which it trickles down from the combination of conventional and non-conventional knowledge, which is Gnosticism, the pure understanding of experience, or a pure experiencing of reality of itself without the filter of the mind. So the yoga, the reunification of the whole with the whole through its parts. And of course, if the part is talking about that and struggles, there's already some incoherence in there. It's like, wait a minute, you're talking about this and that and the other, and I see you all agitated and suffering because I'm stupid. So it doesn't make any sense. So in that sense, I've been able to bring coherence within as I speak of coherence without. And I find it very, very nice, very pleasant, because now I've been able to seize suffering vicariously. I don't suffer through others. Any suffering is necessarily of my own making, regardless of what's going on. And that's truly the true wisdom, is to know where the suffering comes from.
Well,
and the suffering always comes from within.
I guess, Louis, knowledge is the child of wisdom and understanding. So most people only will become aware of the one aspect of suffering, which is the resistance to pain. Removes pain all by itself, but it's usually the attachments, whether it's attachment to pleasure and all that. So for me, my compassion is my attachments, and that is my suffering, because I am compassionate. That I actually look at human race as a whole as a disgusting race, and at the same time, individually, we've shown example. And I'm talking about me now. I'm always projecting. So I realize I don't have to go around and experience everything physically to realize we can harm each other, but at the same time, we can love each other. Like
we can love each other.
I've always made it a point for myself to say the best way I can help the poor is not to become the poor. The best way I can help the rich is not become them. So at least I'll stay in the middle so I can associate with other people.
Yeah.
It would be naive of me to think that I'm at peace with myself. That is a very naive statement for me to say for myself. If a person decides to come to that awareness, all the power.
Scattering, is that something that's happening or that happened? What is it?
Well, Mike, you probably know much more, and you can explain it much better.
I know nothing about scattering theory. One of the things on my to-do list, I think probably next decade, is to go back and learn some elementary physics and try to blend it with some of the mathematics that I know about. I can do just extremely simple things like talk about trajectories of projectiles, things that I did in calculus class. But I can't really, do that much with the mathematics at this point.
Yeah.
But
well,
go ahead.
No, please.
I'm not sure where I was going, so go ahead.
Well, the way I understand it, and I'm not a mathematician, and I'm just a thinker. I'm just trying to make sense of things. And I try to use any science that I can get my hands on, however awkwardly I might be able to use it to make sense of my own consciousness and the world around me. But Feynman, what he did was to describe the way particles at the very basic level of atoms or under atoms come out of nothing when you collide particles and you break them apart. You have other more fundamental particles coming out. That's how they came up with a standard model. And the Feynman diagrams described that scattering of how particles would become another particle, become two particles, and then reunite, how a particle would come out of space, become two, and then become one. And so that's what he described for all the different particles that there are, the pions, the mesons, the quarks, the ups and downs, and all that stuff that I never memorized. I don't even try to memorize it. And of course, all that is very, very complicated mathematics because you have to use complex numbers. Everything is probabilistic. So it's just a dance of, it's like a very complicated stuff. Of course, I try to interpret that not from the mathematical standpoint. I just try to go to the summary, the discussion after they've done all that stuff. They've read the paper and then they talk about it and the ramifications for our thought, for our understanding of reality, about what they're seeing and what the formulas are saying. Everything points to the general idea that I've made myself up, my epistemology, that everything is probabilistic, that everything is organismic. It's a big dynamic, eternal, and infinite process, and that it has no purpose whatsoever. If anything, it would be the quantum nature of reality that is the purpose, but you cannot call that a purpose, not at least in human terms. And that's my interest in trying to understand the deepest implications of inflationary cosmology and quantum mechanics, in trying to then reduce my understanding at my human level.
What is the Feynman diagram?
It just describes particles changing into other particles, combining, disappearing. Sometimes they're just, you have the two particles that go into a direction, then somehow they split apart instantaneously. One thing becomes two, as if by magic. Then they go into certain ways, and then they recombine into the same original particle, or disappears, or all kinds of. So it describes the behavior of particles at the atomic level.
Yeah, Feynman graph. Basically, you're looking at a situation where you have, as Luis said, particles. You have protons, neutrons. You may have photons. You may have other stuff floating around, and you can draw a graph in the sense that you've got directed line segments that connect one with another at nodes. And somehow or other in the graph, you can encode information about how these various particles interact one with another. For example, you may have a line that suddenly ends in a point and branches into two other lines, indicating some sort of process in which it splits into different particles. And the Feynman diagrams apparently can be used to analyze various quantum mechanical situations and make conclusions and calculations about what happens in these situations. Other than that, I can't really tell you anything about them. They're simply a device, like a slide rule.
Like this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like that.
Yeah, that?
Yes. Yeah.
What?
Now that wiggly line that
Is
you
that-
see, there's probably either a different particle or it's no particle at all. That something disappears and reappears
Oh,
from nothing
there's
into
an
those two
electron.
things.
There's an electron,
Wayne.
E minus, and a positron, E plus, producing a photon of V, represented by the blue sine wave. Oh, so an electron and a positron are annihilated to produce a photon.
Mm-hmm.
Then it goes over and becomes a quark antiquark pair. Quark Q.
There you have it.
Antiquark Q.
Very easy for us to understand, extremely complicated in mathematical terms, to describe what they're seeing, what they're, because an electron is just another measurement of something that they can't see anyway. It's just an energy that shows up, and it has a mass, and it has it has a charge, and it has a spin. They can measure those things, but I don't think we've ever seen an electron in and of itself. We see photons for sure, but electrons, I don't think we've ever seen one. We have measured what they do. As a matter of fact, they are telling us that all the electrons are just one electron because they're so identical that Wiener and Feynman had a conversation about that. He says, hey, how come all the electrons are so identical? And he said, because it's the same one. There's only one electron that shows up everywhere.
Wow, that's incredible. So what we're seeing here outside is a scattering of photons. They've collided against a heavy or denser molecules on the tree, and the molecules are made of atoms, and the atoms are made of neutrons. What's the one in the center? Well, electrons spinning around it. What's the other one? Electron. what's the particle in the center of an atom besides a neutron?
Proton.
The proton.
Proton.
Consider the potential dangers of practice as well. In traditional circles, of course, this is not neglected, but in the West, sometimes neglected.
Yeah,
Well,
there's a lot of weak retreats where you get thrown in and you have to stay silent all day, and you do a lot of meditation, and I guess
10.5 hours a day.
You provided some breakfast, lunch, and dinner, maybe. I went on one in the Thai in Kissimmee, the Thai Buddhist center in Kissimmee. What Dharam? But it was for a week that I only stayed there one night.
Oh, why? What happened?
I had to go back to work, but I got to have breakfast with the monks, and I asked them a question: how do you overcome your sexual desires? And they kind of laughed. And they
didn't answer. It's a very valid question.
They take cold showers and think about the female body as just a bag of things.
I think in general, those to go on a 10-day intensive meditation retreat is very, very beneficial. I've seen it give very significant change to a great number of people. Really, 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 really good thing to do. Yeah.
This thing about the meditation and suicide, it reminds me a little bit of in mathematics, they have perturbation mathematics, which is when you're trying to solve a let's say a formula that you can't you don't have an answer for, you don't have a solution for.
Yeah.
You can use perturbation theory, which is to change the computation a little bit, and it gives you some parallel series, and those give you an answer to the problem you could not solve conventionally. And but the problem with those mathematics is that they give you two types of series. One is convergent, which gives you an answer, and the other one is divergent, which doesn't give you an answer. And I draw a parallel with meditation and nihilism, and of course falling into this dark hole of fuck it, and then suicide. Of course, in this case, it's inverted. If your meditation sinks you into the hole of darkness, this doesn't make any sense, nihilism, it's despair, there's no way out of samsara, boom, it could bring you to the brink of depression, some psychosis, or even suicide. But on the contrary, it can bring you out of the hole. And so we got to be careful with the mathematics and meditation.
Whoa.
I would say, Luis, that's very interesting. Like, we're kind of basically thinking outside the box and either hitting on a right or wrong solution. Yeah. But in this case, it was a little different. It wasn't slipping into depression. What I would put it down to was wrong view. And so for me, it's the kind of important topic for that case was the importance of what we call in Buddhism the view. Basically, like worldview, how do you view the world? And so I was breaking it down into the basically two. I mean, I see human mind as basically in two sides, the cognitive and the affective. The cognitive being the kind of thinking, sense of linear time, language, mathematics, all that. Then affect being feelings, basically. So in such intensive meditation, there's a lot of affective work going on. There's a lot of feelings brought up, it's sometimes terrible pain, or sometimes, pain from the past or whatever. And then also, bliss and tranquility, or you could even feel kind of like you're seeing God, or that you are God. And, these are all genuine felt experiences. But for the cognitive side, how do you contextualize that? And in Buddhism, view is very important. I mean, we even put view first when we say view, meditation, and conduct, right? Or do we? Actually, I'm not sure if we do. But let's say on the Noble Eightfold Path, the summary of the Buddha's teachings, view comes first. We have to know, okay, what the hell is going on? What is our situation? And then what do we do about it? Which is what the Four Noble Truths is.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I agree with you that view is fundamental.
Can I just go back a minute?
Okay.
Do the perturbations that you were asking the monks about in terms of, suppressing their sexual desires, does it help? Is perturbation like masturbation, or is that just a mental process? It's just because you're using big words that I'm not really that familiar with. But do the monks use their perturbations in their cold showers to prevent?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question, Joe.
But just let me finish the question. Does Buddhism allow suicide? Is suicide permitted in Buddhism?
No, no. There were some cases of some of the Buddhist disciples who were enlightened, who were very sick and dying to commit suicide. But that's the kind of very rare case. In general, suicide has no place in Buddhism because it doesn't even get you, it doesn't even solve a problem, really. You'll just be reborn somewhere else. So only in the case of basically euthanasia, there's, unlike in Christianity, there is nothing against euthanasia in Buddhism, really. Well, I wouldn't say nothing, but at least at the time of the Buddha, that was not too bad.
I think I would put a little bit of perspectivism on the question and on the answer. First of all, the perturbation and masturbation, they are very equivalent. Very good point. If you read the Four Noble Truths, of which the fourth one is the way, the Magga, it tells you exactly, and the Buddha himself said it, all I teach about is suffering and the cessation of suffering to begin with. So if you take that by the book, then suicide is quite acceptable. But if you go to the right view, which tells you that it is the right view about the Four Noble Truths and the three characteristics of existence, it gives you the formula. Life is suffering. That's the first one. But it says, why do we suffer? Why do we feel? And you yourself said it, there's cognition and there's affect. So why is it that we suffer? And specifically, why do we suffer about life? Because what else can we suffer about? And in the truths that he talks about, he says we suffer because we are attached. We have thirst. We are thirsty. What are we thirsty for? Well, we run away from pain and we run towards pleasure. The moment that we stop doing that, which means that we see reality as it is, we take it with a stiff upper lip and we go, okay, this is what it is. I'm just going to play the game because I'm here. Then we cease to suffer. That is the right view. The right view is there is reality. It is what it is. When we don't like what we see, we suffer, but it's because we think reality is this or reality is that. So the transcending of our own emotions and feelings regarding what is, which is what is, reality as it is the liberation from suffering. And then it gives us the pill, the therapy. How the hell do we do that? Because it's easily said, but not easily done. And that's the fourth truth, which is the way conducive to the cessation of suffering.
Which is the Noble Eightfold Path.
The Noble Eightfold Path. So,
Rami, what do you think? What is perturbation? And what is masturbation?
They're the same.
How
Didn't Louis say that? They're on the four-way path?
How
Noble Eightfold Path.
Oh, Noble Eightfold Path. Sorry.
I did give an expert on the English language on perturbation. So if you want to go into the chat and click on the link, you can use that photo's video explanation.
So the Buddha was working both affectively and cognitively. The core of the Buddha's teaching was the deep meditation training, which is affective work, really, and almost tranquilizing the cognitive function. That so you're putting your brain in certain states that basically reorder it. But the view is very important to contextualize this. So in the case of this lady, she had no training in the view. She had no teacher as the guide. She was going into very deep affective experience, and she was contextualizing that in a very unskillful way. So she thought, I don't know, something about she needed to die to save the universe or something. So it wasn't depression. She was fairly elated, I think, at times, although, you know, also how do you say, anxious at times and so on. So she was a little disorganized affectively, but she'd contextualized her experience in such a way that gave it meaning, which is very important to contextualize things and give them meaning. But the view was so faulty that the meaning was very unskillful and led her to believe that she had to commit suicide. So not depression related, but in terms of view. And this is why in normal Buddhist training in the view is fundamental.
But what's wrong with suicide?
Yeah, after all, that will that helps Lewis's business.
So Lewis, why don't you commit suicide now?
Because I don't want to.
Okay, but would it be good if I made you want to, and then you committed suicide?
But you can.
No,
try,
but would it be good if I succeeded in convincing all three of you to commit suicide, and you did? Would you say that would be good, or neutral, or bad? What would you say?
You have your opinions, I have mine. If you convince me to commit suicide, it's because I decided that, yeah, that was the right way.
So could you answer whether you believe it's good, neutral, or bad if I successfully convince all three of you to commit suicide today? Just good, neutral, or bad?
Is your opinion or my opinion?
I'm asking your opinion, Lewis.
I think you can do whatever the hell you want.
You're not answering my question. Do you think it would be good, neutral, or bad? Please answer.
All three at the same time.
Okay, so our view differs. My view, and I think the normal Buddhist view, would be that would be really not a good thing, that it would be categorized as unskillful, and that it's actually classed as harming. So from my perspective, this is the Buddhist view.
I am not a Buddhist.
Suicide.
I am not a Buddhist, and I am abnormal.
Yeah, but I'm giving the Buddhist view on this.
Yeah, but...
That's a great question. Who decides what the normal Buddhist view is? Is that the
Dalai
Lama?
Joe? Yeah.
Oh, is that the Dalai Lama? I'm just curious.
No,
I don't know, because this is Buddhist. A huge question in all religions that I know of.
Darwin, I would like to. It's a good question, and it's answered differently for Buddhism than it is for, let's say, Catholicism, which has, you know, the Pope is the authority in Catholicism. So I'll pose a question to you.
Wait a minute. Wait, before we divert my question.
I'm answering.
Is there no answer to my question? If there's no answer, that's fine. I accept.
No, there is an answer. I'm trying to answer you.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Okay.
So this is part of my answer, is a question to you, Who gives the authoritative view of science?
Ooh. Each one decides.
Darwin?
It depends which branch of science.
Yes, right. It also depends which branch of Buddhism. And if you'd like to elaborate on your answer, we could maybe follow this.